Hello everyone and welcome back to the Arsenal Pass YouTube channel. It is Hayden here, and I've just returned from Queenstown, New Zealand, where the world premiere for heavy hitters has been taking place alongside the Calling Queenstown. First of all, big shout out to Darren for taking out the Calling Queenstown over the weekend. An awesome event, included with the celebration event that kicked off the week into world premiere for heavy hitters. And of course, this coming weekend, or when I drop this video anyway, this coming weekend is the pre-release for heavy hitters. Now, quite a unique kind of world premiere. We have had world premieres in the past for sets like Uprising, In Flesh and Blood, but this time with heavy hitters, not only is it a week before the pre-release, but we had a calling that was that very same format. So over the weekend for the Calling Queenstown, we did play heavy hitters sealed and heavy hitters draft. And today, I'm going to bring you all my tips and tricks for your pre-release weekend, or maybe, past the pre-release weekend. You just want to get top tips and tricks for playing sealed when it comes to this format. How to lay out your card pool, how to build the deck, things to look for. How do I know which hero to play in heavy hitters, given that there's 6 of them? Now, I feel like I'm a pretty good place to tell you this. I did finish first on day 1 in Swiss. Unfortunately, when it got to the draft portion, after going 7-1 in sealed, my draft didn't go too well. I ended up 0-3ing my draft and missing out on top 8 of the Calling Queenstown, but I did finish day 1 at first seed after... I did get to play a number of sealed decks over the weekend. I think 5 in total, 4 leading up to the event, 2 on the premiere day, plus another 2 that evening to practice. And then I sealed Calling, 7-1 in Swiss on day 1, 0-3 day 2 in the draft. But we won't focus on that. We'll focus on the sealed part because that's what we're talking about today. So I'm going to kick it off. I'm going to try and not spoil too much. I'm not going to go too in depth with the cards as well. It is pre-release weekend, so people, we're going to be exploring the cards and having fun, but we've seen the whole set. If you've watched any of the coverage over the past weekend at Calling Queenstown, you've seen basically every card and how things interact. But I will talk really macro about how to approach this format, some things, pitfalls to avoid, some things you should look out for. But if you want to hear specifics on cards, then make sure to check out our set review for heavy hitters. Our, every set here at Arsenal Pass, myself and Brendan Patrick, we do the limited set reviews. This time, we have a ton of experience under our belt after the Calling Queenstown. So if you want more card-specific sort of evaluations, go and check that out. Now, before I get into it, I want to say, if you're a fan of what we do here at Arsenal Pass, you like the content we put out, you like the podcast, you like the videos we make, things like this, make sure to go and hit the subscribe button. Give us a little like on the video. Tell me as well, drop something in the comments. Tell me about your pre-release experience, or tell me what you're most excited about for this upcoming pre-release. What hero do you want to play for this upcoming pre-release weekend? With that all said, let's get into it and talk about heavy hitters sealed. All right, first things first, let's talk overview, the basics, the absolute basics of heavy hitters limited. There is, of course, 3 classes. You've got the warrior, you've got the brute, you've got the guardian, and you've got 2 heroes for each within the classes. So when you sit down to play your sealed pool this weekend, you can have a choice between those 3 classes and then 2 heroes within. And we'll talk about why you might want to play each hero or how to get drawn towards which class in the sealed format. But the first thing to note is that there is 6 heroes available to you across Victor, Betsy, Sai, Olympia, KO, Reiner, nailed it, to choose from. Plus, as well, you are getting 6 14 card packs. Now, if you played Bright Lights, maybe Bright Lights was the first time you played a pre-release for Flesh and Blood, or you played Sealed in Flesh and Blood, you got 4 packs. That is a bit of a non-traditional seal format. We've gone back to a more traditional seal format with heavy hitters. We're getting 6 packs of Welcome, almost said Welcome to Wraith. It's not Welcome to Wraith, it's heavy hitters, but it did feel a little bit like playing some Welcome to Wraith. If you've ever played Welcome to Wraith Sealed, it is similar. So you can take some things from that into this format. But no, heavy hitters limited, 14 card packs. You're going to have a total of 84 cards to work with to build your sealed deck. Now within the pack breakdown, you're going to have, of course, your classics. You're going to have your foil. You're going to have your rare, your 2 rares or higher, rare and rare card higher. You're going to have your piece of equipment. But then you're going to have 5 class cards broken down across the 3 classes. You're going to have 3 hybrid cards. Now, these are the dual class cards that we have in heavy hitters, and there's 1 for each of the wedges. So between each class or each class pairing, there is hybrid or dual class cards that you can open, and these are really important. These are going to fill out a lot of your deck. These cards are quite powerful, and when you get to draft, these are the cards that keep you open, but they have the identity between the wedges, so to speak, when it comes to the archetypes or the types of hero or the types of deck that each of the heroes wants to play. So keep an eye out for those. They are going to sort of signpost a little bit about where you could end up with your deck. And then you do have generics as well. There is a couple of generics, and there is a chance to have another piece of equipment in your pack. So if you open a pack with 2 pieces of equipment, or even a piece of equipment, or 2 pieces of equipment and a weapon. Don't be surprised, this can happen in heavy hitters. It is, of course, the arena. It's all about the equipment. It's all about the weapons. You do have rare token weapons in the set. In previous sets, we had the majestic weapons that were really hard to open. Traditionally, you'd just be playing with the token weapons. But in this set, we have token weapons for each of the classes, but we do also then have some rare weapons, 2 rare weapons per class, actually, that you can... these are really important. These are actually build-around cards. These cards are quite good. So if you do open one of the rare weapons, something like Hot Streaks or Miller's Grindstone, Ball Breaker, you should definitely look out for these cards because they are really powerful sort of signposts to try and build that class if you can, because those weapons in particular are really great focal points for a potential sealed deck. So keep an eye out for those. We've talked basics of heavy hitters. Now let's get into some of the things that you should do when you sit down with those 6 packs in front of you. First thing you're going to want to do is you're going to sort them into piles. Now, traditionally, you have 3 or 4 classes, and it's pretty easy. You just put your generics, your ninja, your warrior, your guardian, your brute, whatever, and you sort them out into your piles. And then, Bob's your uncle. Start to look through those piles. What's the biggest pile? What has the best cards? It's a little bit different with heavy hitters because of these wedges, plus all the equipment actually as well. So what I like to do with my layout is, I'm going to check this on screen right now. You can see with my layout, I like to have my classes almost in a triangle. So you can see in this instance, I've got warrior at the top, brute on the left, and guardian on the right. And then between each of those, I like to put the wedges. So it almost forms kind of a circle by the end of it. I start with the triangle of my classes, and then in between, I put my hybrid cards, effectively, my dual class cards. But the way I do that, first of all, actually, is I sort into the 3 classes, my generics, my equipment and weapons, and all the dual class cards together. And then nifty little trick that James White showed on stream is that when you have your full slab or your full stack of your hybrid dual class cards, what you can then do, you can shuffle through them and you can pull out all the different borders. Now, first of all, you shuffle through and you can pull out the left-hand side border, where you'll see different borders on the left-hand side there. As you can see, I'm throwing this on the screen right now. And then what you want to do after that is you want to take the rest, because I have the same border. They're not quite aligned. You flip them up, and then you can shuffle through the rest, and you're going to see the difference between the warrior border here that you can pull out. Now you got your 3 piles. I like to sit those between a triangle for each of the wedges and start to go through it that way. Now, once I've got it broken out into that almost circle after I started with my triangle, first thing I'm actually going to do is I'm going to look at my equipment and weapons, because it's a small pile and it's going to tell me what's what. Like I said before at the top of the show, weapons are really good in this format. It's the arena after all. The rare weapons are things that are going to potentially signpost you. Now, not all rare weapons are created equal, especially in sealed. I'm not a parry blade, for instance. It's perfectly fine. But parry blade versus hot streaks are going to get me a lot more excited about going into warrior, particularly Kasai, but even Olympia, as opposed to parry blade. On the other side, for instance, I think we'll talk about this with the heroes, but KO is the more probable brute that you will play in sealed. And so Ball Breaker is a lot better than mini meat axe, for instance. So those are the kind of things I'm looking at. The next thing is I'm going to look at my equipment. You're very likely going to be able to field a full set of equipment, probably for most of the classes that you could play, but definitely, or almost definitely, probably for at least one. And often, as long as the other cards align, it's going to be a great place to look, because there's some really powerful equipment in this set, especially at rare. If you have any of the specialization heads, you should look out for these. So whether that's for KO in particular, Betsy, Olympia, Victor, these are really strong. So you should look out for these. You'll see them throwing these cards on screen, of course. Look out for these. These are a really good indication of going into these heroes, because these particular can, they start and play, they have effects that are really powerful. And yeah, you should look for those as signposts. But then beyond that, you've got some other pieces of equipment that are really important. The chest piece and brute, raw meat, is really powerful. Flat trackers across the warrior / brute hybrid equipment is really powerful as well. That agility tokens are really powerful in this format. So an equipment that makes an agility token, plus Gauntlet of Might. These are some of the equipments I'm looking out for, as opposed to indicate where I might go when it comes to choosing my hero. Now, after I've done that, noted a few things, maybe I've pulled out some of the more powerful equipment and weapons, I'm going to go over to my generics, just quickly have a look through. Have I got any power cards in my generics, any majestics in my generics? Pull those out, and then after that, just have a little look. What have I got here? Have I got some resources in blue? Rally the Rear Guard's another card I like to look out for, actually, in my generics, because there's a lot of block 2s in this set versus some of the sets previously where we've had a lot of block 3s. So I like to look out for Rally the Rear Guard, because it's effectively a block 3 and it can turn some of my no blocks and 2 blocks into a block 3. I'd like to see if I have any Rally the Rear Guard, particularly at blue and red. And then I'm going to go in and look at my class specifically. So I'll start with the class card, then I'll get to the hybrid. I'm going to go through here. I like to sort them into color. So I like to sort them into blue, yellow, red. And I like to pull out my power cards at the front, the cards that can win me games. So if I'm looking at KO, for instance, this could be things like Wild Ride Red. That's a card I think is really, really important in KO. If I'm looking at Warrior, for instance, and I'm thinking about, could I play Kasai? I'm looking for Draw Swords Red. I'm looking for red attack reactions there. Whereas on the Brute side, I'm looking for red 6+ attacks, or these effects that have powerful, or these cards that have powerful effects on them. Guardian, on the other hand, I'm looking for my big hitters, my big damage cards. Some of my wager cards I'm looking for as well once I get to the hybrids. So we'll get to the hybrids next. Same thing again. I'm sorting it by color: blue, yellow, red, and then I'm looking for my power cards. What are the things that are going to pull me into a particular class or archetype? And we'll talk about the heroes soon, but things like Wage Agilities or Wage Mights. Do I have any of the block cards? Those in particular, when I'm looking at my generics, are they going to fit into any of the heroes I might play? So yeah, I've got Wage of Strength, and I'm looking through my Guardian cards. I've got a few ways to, a few good Victor cards and some ways to make gold. Perfect. Now I'm starting to see that maybe Victor's open on the table. So I'm going to look through those, pull out my power cards in both my class and hybrid, and then just start to piece it together. Okay, what looks like I might be able to play, and then I'll just start to lay them out. If, let's say I think, maybe there's a good Victor deck here. I'm seeing some good ways to make gold. I've got the head specialization, and I've got some good payoffs as well. Plus I've got, 12 to 14 blues, and a good chunk of them block 3. Great, let's lay it out and see if we can make this deck. Do I have 30 cards? And let's go from there. Now I'll talk a bit about deck size soon, but that's how I lay out the deck. So we've sorted out our cards, we've started to look through and pull out the power cards, but let's actually talk about each of the heroes and what are the things that make me want to go into those heroes, or how do I play them? Why do I want to play them? Now, first thing I want to say is that in the sealed format, from what I've seen so far, my experience at the world premiere, and even from what I'd heard from some of the devs as well about the design of sealed versus draft, is that in sealed, there's kind of a hero that stands out of the classes. A little bit easier to build in sealed versus draft, where you get to pick your cards. Sealed, obviously, you just get this pile of cards, you're going to put them together. So KO versus Rhinar, I think you're going to see a lot more sealed pools that should be KO than Rhinar. Rhinar's really hard to build in sealed. You need a lot of cards like Bonebreaker Bellow, a lot of cards like the Agility Whip, the 6 attack or 5, 6, 7 attack discard to create an agility token. You need some good payoffs with Intimidate, some things like Pack Hunt or even Rawhide. So you're looking for these cards if you're going to play Rhinar. It's really hard to get together, but if you do see a lot of these cards, a lot of Discard and Intimidate, and you have a bunch of good Brute cards and less ways, Rhinar doesn't need agility tokens as much. So agility tokens are really, really powerful in the set, and they are really good, and KO really needs them because it doesn't have access to those 2 weapons. So it needs to be attacking with multiple attacks a lot of the time to get big damage through. Whereas Rhinar can kind of set up these turns, block a little bit better, double claw turns, and can sort of pace it out a little bit. But you really need a lot of Intimidate cards to make sure you can finish the game. So Rhinar, a little bit harder to build in sealed versus KO. We'll start there. And then on the flip side of that, I look at something like Victor versus Betsy. I think Victor, you need a lot of good ways to make gold in order to make sure that you can really abuse that hero ability. You can make sure that you can get the most out of those drawing those cards. So if you don't have good ways to make gold, Victor's probably off the table. But Betsy, a few good wager cards. You've got that overpower ability for late game. A lot easier to build in the sealed format. So probably a lot more common to see Betsy than Victor in sealed. Kasai versus Olympia, I think it's similar, but I do think Olympia is comparative to the other 2 classes in Warrior. Olympia and Kasai are a little bit closer, but Kasai's hero ability is just so powerful. And in sealed, where the games can be a bit longer, sometimes, this format is not slow, but I think the Kasai hero ability just overall is so powerful that majority of the time you're going to see that. And again, you need kind of specific cards to make sure that you can really play Olympia. But I did play Olympia in my first sealed pool, the world premiere. I played Olympia. It was fantastic. I had a great time. But I did open the Majestic Specialization for Olympia, which I think is a good way to get into Olympia because that card is just kind of insane. So that's kind of the differences. You will see that one hero in particular in each class is more played and probably the safer option if you're unsure between the 2 of them to go for those more obvious heroes. So let's talk why you should play each of them. I talked about equipment before and signposts there, but within each hero there are some things that you're going to want to make sure you really tick off. So let's start with Brute. I'm looking at Rhinar versus KO. Like I said, I'm probably going to be playing KO unless there's a lot of good cards for Rhinar. But the things I'm looking for in particular are agility. I'm looking for ways to make agility so I can keep my combat chains going. I'm looking for really strong payoffs. I'm looking at my number of 6s. Rhinar, I still want to have a good number of 6s because this is how I trigger my discards, things like that. But in KO, I want majority of my deck to be effective 6s. And what I mean by this is that you can count your 5 attacks as 6s because of KO. But these are the things that I'm going to need for my random discards, particularly Wild Ride and Bare Fangs, which are 2 cards I think are just so important when it comes to playing KO. But also cards are going to help you win clashes. KO is really good at winning this little new mechanic called Clash. Clash comes up quite a lot. There's a lot of it in this format, and KO is the best hero at winning Clash just because of the sheer number of 6+ power attacks that you have, or even 8 power attacks because your 7 gets +1 effectively. So every time you Clash, you reveal an attack action, KO is giving that +1 attack to it. It just helps you win so many more clashes, and Clash is value. So that's kind of what it's all about. You're looking for your number of 6. I like to have ideally like 20+ 6s in my KO deck, but I have gotten away with like 17 to 18. I have seen as low as 16. I think 17 is kind of minimum for me, effective 6s when it comes to KO. So that's including my 5 attacks. So that's something I'm looking out for. And then I'm just looking to make sure I do have some payoffs. That is across every class. But once I've got my agility, I've got my effective 6 count, I'm looking at my payoffs. Let's look at Warrior now. When it comes to Warrior, what am I looking for? Well, I see Kasai is kind of the more powerful, I think, in Sealed, or the easier to put together, definitely. And the cards I'm looking for is, again, I'm looking for agility tokens. I want to make sure I can double attack with those weapons. And when I double attack with weapons, I don't want to pay anything for those weapons. I want to trigger my hero ability. So I'm looking for ways to draw cards. A card like Draw Swords in particular, really powerful. There's also the attack reaction that allows you to draw a card and put a card on top or bottom. That card's really powerful as well to make your next saber free, for instance. I'm looking for ways to just trigger Go Again outside of agility. There's an attack, a non-attack action that enables you to do that as well. So want to go wide on the chain with Kasai. We want to ideally not pay for our weapons. So even a couple of ways to make gold tokens are quite nice as well. Things I'm less keen on having in my warrior decks is things like Clash. I'm not going to have as many attack actions, so Clash is a lot less important. I'm going to lose Clashes a lot more than I win them. So I don't really want to be playing these block cards, except for maybe the agility one. Just because agility is so powerful, but most of the time I don't want to be clashing because I'm going to lose a lot of them playing warrior. In saying that, I do want some attack actions in my deck, and things like that I'm looking for things like wage agility, particularly if I'm going to play Olympia, of course. If you want to play Olympia, then you must make sure that you've got a lot of wage cards because you need to win wages. I'm looking for things like money where your mouth is, the non-attack action that lets you wage your gold. I'm looking for wage agility. I'm looking for wage vigor. I'm looking for these sorts of things. I'm looking for attack reactions to pair with them. If you can do something like 4-card hand, slam down your wage agility, or even 3-card hand with a vigor token from the turn before, and then you get to pay 1 and pump it for 3. Let's say get over the top of their blocks. Make sure you really win that wage in a great way to make sure that you firstly trigger your hero ability. You just get a lot of value off your turn. And there is a card in particular I am looking out for if I want to play Olympia. It is the 0-cost attack reaction that I'm showing right now. If you have some of this, then I'm excited about potentially playing Olympia if I've got some of these in red. 1, 2. I mean, 2 would be a dream, but 1 in red, maybe 1 in yellow, and a couple of wage cards. And I'm starting to think Olympia might be live. And if I open anything like the Majestic Head in Olympia, or the Spec Head, the Specialization Head at rare, or the Majestic Specialization, then I'm definitely thinking Olympia's on. Guardian, let's take a look at Guardian. If I want to play a Guardian, the things I'm looking for is definitely big attacks, but I'm also looking for blue block 3s. I want to make sure that I have a good chunk of blue block 3s in my deck as well. I think the Guardians want to block the most in Sealed. I think both Kasai and Olympia and KO can be really aggressive and look to string together these really big turns and can kind of get away with more 2 blocks in the deck. I think Guardian is a little bit different. You want to make sure that you've got enough blues to be able to pay for your attacks, to swing your weapon, but then also enough block 3s so that you can kind of, when you don't have the right hand set up, you can block out. The other thing I'm looking for, particularly if I'm going to play Betsy, is a couple of these 2-cost auras. Things like Bet Big or Big Bop. These are the things I'm looking for. I love the names on these cards. I'm looking for these because they're going to enable me to set up some really big turns where I can overpower. Especially, you only have to do this once or twice in the game to win a game. So, coming in for 12, 13, 14 overpower is a really great way to close out games. So these are the things that I'm looking for in particular. So if I want to play Victor, then I'm going to make sure I've got ways to create gold. So money where your mouth is, test of strength. These are the things. Even the 0 for 3, we've played from Arsenal. You go again. This card is great. Britons, give me a block and give me a 3 block. Otherwise, I'm going to get a gold token and I'm going to draw a card. So something to definitely look out for. All right, last up, let's talk tips and tricks and pitfalls to avoid. And I think let's start with the pitfalls because the set is quite different. I have to really commend LSS on the set and the design. I think this is the best limited format so far. And I know it's early days. I've played 4 sealeds and a couple of drafts. I did soon as I O3 my draft, I went straight back in and got into an on-demand draft at the venue on Sunday to do another heavy hitters draft, just so I had some more things to arm myself with when it came to Discussion Unlimited this week. But this format is honestly fantastic. The seal format in particular, I think this is the best seal format. LSS have really put a lot of time and effort into this limited format to make sure that it's balanced. The heroes all really sort of even. There's a really good balance between what used to be a lot of fatigue in sealed. You could the outsiders, bright lights, a lot of fatigue. This set, a lot more 2 blocks. The average defensive value is definitely lower, and a lot of ways to punish people for trying to defend out on fatigue with things like overpower, with attack reactions in the set. And of course, like we just said, the 2 blocks. So, how many cards to play, and is fatigue viable? Fatigue might be viable in some instances, but it shouldn't be your A plan. If you want to go and check out a really great match that I think, my favorite match that I got to play over the weekend was actually on stream. It was myself against 2022 World's Top 8 competitor, Viet Pham. We got to play a game at that Worlds actually, and we got a rematch. I got my vengeance against Viet this time round. He was playing Kasai, I was playing KO in the seal format. Go check it out in the coverage. But Viet presented 40 odd cards, and I presented 32. And Viet's said to me his plan B was to fatigue, but plan A was definitely to posture and set up and kill, because it's actually quite hard to fatigue in this format with the amount of 2 blocks. You're not going to get enough 3 block density to just go straight fatigue. And as well, there is, as I said before, a lot of ways to punish. But also what just happens is actually you can fatigue out. In one round, I had an opponent present 43 cards. I presented 32. I ended up killing them anyway, but we got towards the end game, and we actually, even on cards, I was going to fatigue them, if anything. So just because I was presenting so much efficient damage, and they were having to block more cards than I was expending on offense just to keep me out. So fatigue, I think, is not particularly viable in this format. Like, not to say it isn't, but it's going to be a rarity that you can actually default to fatigue. It's probably going to look something like a Guardian deck with a lot of 3 blocks, a lot of block cards, and probably Miller's Grindstone, so you can actually mill some of the cards off the deck, destroy some of these cards on their deck so that they have less cards to actually play. But otherwise, I think fatigue, and I'm really happy to say this, is not a particularly viable option in heavy hitters sealed. So I'm down with that. In terms of cards to play, I think if you can have a tight 30 with the best sort of synergistic explosive deck you can have, that's where you want to be. I played 30 to 32 cards in my sealed deck the whole time. I think I went to 33 once when I knew my opponent was going to try and fatigue me. But to be honest, I didn't even need that 33 card. I think there is instances where you might want to play some more cards. In the Warrior Mirror, I had been told by a very reliable source, one of the devs actually, that they like having a higher number of cards in the Warrior Mirror because it can kind of get a bit grindy, and it is a bit of a second cycle matchup, which I do agree with. So in that matchup, I think in the Warrior Mirror, I don't mind playing 34 to 36 cards. I actually think Kasai is the hero probably wants to or can play more cards because you just expend cards a little bit differently at a different rate, and sometimes you just brick and have to take turns off and throw your whole hand in an attack. So I think for Kasai in particular, especially when playing in the mirror and you're having to expend some of your non-attack actions to block and hold out turns, you can play more than 32, 33 cards. I wouldn't go much higher than 34, 35, 36 in those matchups, and majority of the time in most matchups, I want 30 to 33 cards, and I think that is a fantastic place to be. So yeah, keep an eye out. Don't pile in this format. Don't chuck everything in. You can get punished for all 2 blocks, and you're going to weaken and dilute your deck in a format that isn't actually particularly slow. So something to definitely watch out for. In terms of other tips, tricks, pitfalls, things to avoid, one thing I want to shout out is the use of equipment. Now, you want to be really careful of a card called Down But Not Out. This card is a rare, but this card is super punishing, one of the most powerful cards in the format. And if you get into an in-game situation where this 8 attack for overpower could actually kill you, you should really make sure you understand how many tokens you have in play and what your equipment's doing. Sometimes you actually want to get rid of your equipment just so that this card can't be activated and can't be played against you. In terms of when to use your equipment, you're going to want to try and use your equipment as efficiently as possible, especially when you're playing against Warrior. Stop on hit effects, and this can be the same true for Guardian. But against Brute, you're a little bit less worried. You can kind of just use this to preserve life. I, in this format, like to keep my life total a bit higher, particularly against Warrior, because there's not a lot you can do about the attack reaction. So if you get into a slot playing against Kasai or Olympia, later on where you're on 2 or 3 life, then you have to play around or just die to attack reactions. That's not a place I want to be. So I like trying to keep my life total higher, blocking early, blocking with my equipment early so that I can't get blown out by an attack reaction, or so I don't have to start over blocking and losing value on an attack reaction or a potential attack reaction turn later in the game. So yeah, my tip would be against Warrior, just keep your life total a little bit higher if you can. I think it's a good spot to be in. Lastly, I want to talk ratios and what you kind of want in your deck build. Let's start with Guardian. I kind of already talked about it, but I'm really looking for really minimum 12 blues, but almost half my deck I think could be blues, especially. And the reason I probably want to play Guardian in the sealed is looking for those 3 blocks and some powerful attacks. So if I do get an all hand of blues, at least I can come in with, you know, a blue wager that has 5 or 6 power that I can overpower, for instance. So you want to be looking for some good blues, and that I think the other things you want to look for is some of the auras. I talk about Big Bop and Bet Big. I want a big Bop, and the other one on screen right now. I think with these you want a couple of these, but you don't want too many. So I like 2 or 3 of these max kind of thing. I'm talking about Warrior. I think in Warrior you can get away with like 8 blue, especially if you've got ways to draw cards and kind of make your weapons free. And you do, especially for Kasai, want to make sure you've got a good number of yellows. You don't just want to play no yellows, because you do have to use yellows to activate your hero ability. So, you know, sort of like 7 or 8 yellows, as high as 7 or 8 yellows, I think is fine. But, you know, being around like 2 or 3, that might not be enough in your Kasai deck. You do actually have to understand that you do want yellows in Kasai to get that hero ability going. In terms of actually using that hero ability, I think, you know, you can use that late to start rolling gold tokens, and that's really, really powerful. Crack a gold token with my agility token, my weapons are free, I activate Kasai, I threaten another gold token, I can just continue to cheat on resources potentially. Brute, on the other hand, I think if you're playing KO, you actually want quite a lot of blues. Blues are really good, and especially you want to make sure that you've got these 5 attack blues that are effective 6 attacks in KO. And I'm looking for really like 9 to 10 blues in my KO. I would play as high as 11, even 12 if I have really, really good blues, especially if I'm going to play around 32 cards. And this is all, I'm basing this all on about a 30 card deck. So, you know, I'd set Kasai, I would go up to 34, 35 cards in the mirror, for instance. You know, in that case, maybe instead of 7 to 9 blues, I want like 9 to 11 blues, for instance. Those ratios, I think it's a good place to be, and just sort of keep that in mind when you're building these decks. That's going to do it for this Heavy Hitters Sealed Primer. Good luck at pre-releases this week, and enjoy. Heavy Hitters is a phenomenal sealed experience. Play around with the heroes, see what you can build. Try different hero builds as well. That's what pre-release is all about. And yeah, make sure you get in there, have fun. If you aren't already subbed to the Arsenal Pass YouTube channel, make sure you're doing it. Leave us a comment, let us know what heroes you're going to play this weekend, what you're excited about for Heavy Hitters pre-release. And if you're watching this after playing pre-release, let me know what you thought of the format. What were some of your learnings? What were some of the things from this video that either helped or that you'd like to add in? You think that everyone should know about Heavy Hitters Sealed. But otherwise, enjoy playing Sealed and enjoy Heavy Hitters.